Before we dive in, let me ask you, have you ever wondered what it feels like to sign away your future, only to find something you never expected waiting on the other side? If you love stories that stir the heart and stay with you long after they end, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. You won't want to miss what happens next. I used to think I would marry for love. I used to think there would be flowers, maybe a song I could hum along to in my mother's kitchen while she adjusted the hem of my wedding dress with those small, patient hands of hers. But the hem was never finished. And there were no flowers. No song. Only silence. I stood there, staring at the dress she had started sewing months ago. The ivory fabric hung limp on the old wooden hanger by the window. A faint stream of moonlight spilled across the floor of our tiny bakery, catching on the delicate lace my mother had stitched by hand. I pressed my palm to my chest, feeling the panic stir beneath my ribs. I could still hear her humming that lullaby, Scarborough Fair, soft and low, the way she used to when I was little. She had never finished the last verse. She always said it belonged to the future. But now, there was no future. Not for me. The front door creaked open behind me, snapping me back to the dark, bitter present. My father shuffled into the bakery with a look I'd learned to dread. His hands trembled as he wiped his face with a stained handkerchief, refusing to meet my eyes. And then he entered. Dominic Blackwood. The man I had heard whispered about in this town for years, but had never dared imagine would cross the threshold of our failing bakery. He looked so completely out of place, towering in a charcoal coat, his sharp jaw shadowed by the dim light, his dark eyes scanning the room like nothing here could possibly hold his attention, until they landed on me. And I forgot how to breathe. I'd heard he was ruthless. I'd heard he could make men twice his age kneel in fear. But standing there, watching him walk toward me like a storm wrapped in silk, I realized I had no idea what ruthless really meant. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't offer a greeting. Instead, he placed a leather folder on the counter between us. "A contract," he said, his voice deep and unforgiving. "1 year, as my wife. In exchange, your family's debt is gone." My breath hitched. My father's face crumpled. He turned to me, eyes wet with shame. "Please, Bella," he whispered. "We have no other choice." I couldn't speak. Couldn't move. I could only stare at the folder that might as well have been a noose. Dominic slid a pen across the counter toward me. "It's your decision. But know this. Your father signed a note he can't repay. Without me, he'll lose everything." "You'll lose everything," I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But I could feel the weight of my mother's frail breaths coming from the back room. The soft beeping of the heart monitor. We couldn't afford to keep running much longer. My hands trembled as I reached for the pen. He watched me. Silent, unflinching, swallowed the lump in my throat and pressed the tip to the paper. My signature looked foreign and broken on the page. Dominic leaned in, his breath brushing my cheek like frost. "You belong to me now, Isabella Carter." And just like that, I lost myself. Hours later, after Dominic had gone, and my father had collapsed into a heap of guilt and defeat on the old sofa, I wandered through the dark bakery, feeling like a ghost. I found myself in my mother's room, where she lay asleep, her thin chest rising and falling beneath a threadbare blanket. Her hands, those same hands that had once sewn my clothes, lay folded on her stomach. Something glimmered on the nightstand, a small wooden box. I reached for it with fingers that barely felt real. The lid creaked open to reveal a folded piece of yellowed paper. A letter, worn at the edges, addressed in delicate handwriting I didn't recognize. To Evelyn Carter, from Margaret Blackwood. I sank onto the edge of the bed, my heart pounding. Margaret Blackwood, his mother. I unfolded the letter, my eyes scanning the words like they might catch fire if I blinked. My dearest Evelyn, if one day our children's paths should cross, Perhaps they will find the courage we never did. And there, it ended, the ink faded, the rest, ripped clean away. I stared at the torn edge, my mind racing with 1,000 questions. What had my mother and Margaret shared? What did she mean by courage? I pressed the letter to my chest, swallowing the ache in my throat. I had signed my name to a life I didn't choose. But maybe, just maybe, there was more to this story than I understood, and I knew I had to find out. If you had asked me to picture my wedding day, I might have described sunlight spilling through the windows of a small white chapel, maybe a quiet gathering of friends and neighbors. My mother standing by my side, smoothing the back of my dress. My father giving me away, with tears in his eyes, but pride in his heart. I never imagined this. I stood alone in front of a towering, iron gate staring up at Blackwood Manor for the first time. It looked less like a home and more like a fortress. Gray stone walls stretching into the sky, windows darkened like watchful eyes. The air smelled of rain and cedar, sharp and cold. I shivered beneath my borrowed coat. No one greeted me at the side door. No one led me inside. I stood in the entryway, clutching the small bag I had packed with trembling hands. Everything I owned fit inside it. Everything that mattered had already been left behind. A maid in a crisp black uniform appeared from around the corner, her face expressionless. "Mr. Blackwood is waiting," she said quietly. I followed her through endless hallways of polished wood and marble floors that echoed with every step I took. Portraits of men I didn't recognize lined the walls. Blackwoods, no doubt. Men who had built empires. Men who had built cages. The room where the ceremony was to be held wasn't a chapel. It wasn't anything like the warm, familiar space I had pictured all my life. It was a library, massive and cold, with walls of dark mahogany and towering shelves filled with leather-bound books that smelled of dust and distance. At the far end of the room, Dominic stood waiting. He didn't look at me as I entered. He didn't smile. He wore black, of course. A tailored suit that made him look like a statue carved from night itself. His hands were in his pockets, his jaw set like stone. There were no guests, no flowers, no music. Just us. And a man in a suit who must have been some kind of officiant, though no one had bothered to introduce him. I stood across from Dominic, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure it echoed off the walls. The officiant cleared his throat and began reciting the words of a vow neither of us believed in. His voice was flat, mechanical, like he had done this 1,000 times before, and couldn't care less who stood before him now. Dominic's eyes stayed on the floor. When the man asked if I took Dominic to be my lawfully wedded husband, I could barely force the word from my lips. "I do." Dominic's reply was a whisper, so quiet I almost missed it. "I do." There were no rings, no kiss. The officiant declared us husband and wife and left without another word. And just like that, it was done. The maid led me to a room on the second floor. It was beautiful, in the way museum exhibits are beautiful, untouched, distant, cold. I stood in the center, hugging myself, trying not to cry. Hours passed. No one came. Finally, unable to bear the silence any longer, I wandered into the hallway. I followed the faintest sound of movement down the corridor, past rooms I was too afraid to enter. I found him in the study, standing by the window, looking out into the rain-soaked night. He didn't turn when I entered. I stood there for what felt like forever, before I finally found the courage to speak. "Why? Why did you do this?" I whispered. His shoulders tensed. For a moment, I thought he might not answer at all. But then, without looking at me, he spoke. "Because your father owes me a debt he cannot repay." His voice was colder than the rain outside. "And because I could." I felt something crack inside me, something small but sharp. I wanted to scream that I wasn't a debt. that I wasn't a thing to be claimed because someone could. But the words caught in my throat. He finally turned to face me, his dark eyes unreadable. "This is your home now," he said quietly. "You will want for nothing. You are free to go wherever you please." He paused. "Except back to Portland." My breath hitched, except back to my family. He turned back to the window, dismissing me without another word. I slept alone that night, in a bed far too big for one person. The silence pressed in on me like a second skin. I didn't know whether to cry or scream or run. I woke before dawn, unable to stay in that room a second longer. I wrapped myself in a shawl and padded down the stairs to the kitchen, hoping to find something, anything, that felt real. I wasn't expecting to see the housekeeper quietly unpacking a delivery by the back door. She paused when she saw me, then gestured to a basket on the counter. "For you," she said simply, and left. I approached the basket with shaking hands. Fresh fruit, imported tea, heart medication. There was a note tucked inside. For her heart, from DB. I stared at the handwriting, simple and neat. I didn't understand. Dominic hadn't spoken a kind word to me since the day I met him. And yet, he had sent this? Tears burned the back of my eyes, but I bit them back. I didn't know who Dominic Blackwood really was. But I was beginning to realize he was not what he seemed. I began to learn something about silence. It wasn't just the absence of sound. It had weight. It filled every room in Blackwood Manor, settling into the corners like dust no one dared to touch. It pressed into my skin until I could feel it in my bones. Dominic had not spoken to me since the night of our wedding. Not a word, not a glance. I saw him sometimes, moving like a shadow down the long halls. He would disappear into his study, his office, or the conference room, where men in suits came and went like soldiers reporting to their general. I told myself I should be grateful. He wasn't cruel. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't touch me. But somehow, his distance hurt more than anything he could have done. I tried to keep myself busy. I read old books from the library. I walked through the garden alone. I stood by the window for hours, tracing the rain with my fingertips on the glass. But every night, I thought of home. I thought of my mother lying in her small bed in Portland. I thought of her hands, pale and shaking. I thought of the lullaby she used to hum, and I wondered if she could still hear it. It happened late one night. I was walking past the study when I heard his voice. Low, rough, like something cracking apart. Knew I shouldn't listen. I should have walked away. But something about the way he spoke made me stop. "She doesn't know," Dominic said quietly. There was silence on the other end of the line, just the faint crackle of a voice I couldn't make out. "I've watched her for years, since she was 13. His voice broke on, the last word. I pressed a hand over my mouth to stop the breath that hitched in my throat. "She's all I ever wanted, and now she looks at me like I'm a monster." My knees nearly buckled. I didn't stay to hear the rest. I ran. Down the hall, up the stairs, into my room. I shut the door and pressed my back against it, trying to breathe. Years? Had he been watching me? That long? I curled up on the bed, pulling the blanket around me like armor. My mind raced with questions I couldn't answer. The next morning, I couldn't stop thinking about the letter I'd found back home. The letter from Margaret Blackwood. I couldn't explain why, but something about it felt like the key to a lock I hadn't dared open. I waited until the house was quiet, then slipped into the library. I searched the shelves until I found an old wooden box marked Family Records. My heart pounded as I opened it, scanning faded papers and brittle envelopes until I found what I didn't know I was looking for. A letter. Addressed to Margaret Blackwood. Written in handwriting I recognized instantly. My mother's. I unfolded it with trembling hands. "Dear Margaret, I've never had the courage to tell you how much your friendship meant to me. When I met your family, I thought maybe, just maybe, the world wasn't as cruel as I feared. But your father made it clear. I wasn't good enough. We weren't good enough. So I left. I married George, and I never looked back. But sometimes I wonder, if our children meet one day, will they carry the kindness we couldn't? No blood binds them. No history they need to bear. Just a chance to be better than us. I clutched the letter to my chest, tears welling in my eyes. Dominic wasn't some dark thread tangled in my family's past. We were not bound by anything but choice. And somehow, that terrified me even more. That evening, I stood outside his study. For a long time, I raised my hand to knock, and let it fall to my side again. I wanted to ask him. I wanted to hear it from him. But my heart wasn't ready. I turned to leave. That night, I dreamed of the bakery, of my mother's hands folding dough on the wooden counter, of the soft hum of her voice filling the kitchen, of the way she used to tell me, love isn't something you take, Bella. It's something you give when you're ready to be brave. When I woke, I knew I couldn't keep running from this. I had to face him. I had to face myself. And maybe, just maybe, find out if there was still a heart beneath all that silence. The house felt heavier that morning, like the walls had drawn closer overnight, like the air had thickened somehow. I didn't bother with breakfast. I couldn't have swallowed a thing even if I'd tried. I stood outside Dominic's study again, for the third time in 2 days. But this time, I didn't turn away. I lifted my hand, knuckles brushing against the wood, and I knocked. No answer. I waited, heart pounding. I counted to 10, to 20. Still nothing. I tried again. Still silence. I pressed my ear to the door. Heard movement. Just a faint rustle, like someone shifting in their chair. I knew he was in there. I almost left. Almost convinced myself I had imagined everything. But before I could move, the door opened, slowly, without warning. Dominic stood there. His jacket was gone, his sleeves rolled up. His tie hung loose around his neck, and for the first time, he didn't look like a stranger carved from stone. He just looked tired. He didn't speak. He didn't step aside. But he didn't close the door either. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to steady. Can we talk? His jaw flexed, but he nodded, once and moved back to let me in. The room was warm, the curtains drawn tight against the late morning light. A fire crackled softly in the hearth, casting long shadows across the floor. Dominic walked to the far end of the room and leaned against the edge of the massive oak desk, his arms crossed over his chest. I stood in the center of the room, hands shaking at my sides. I read the letter, I whispered. His eyes darkened, like a storm had just rolled in behind them. I know there's no blood between us, I continued, my voice catching. I know about our mothers. He looked away, his jaw tightening. I heard what you said on the phone, I added, quieter still. About watching me. His whole body stiffened. I waited for him to speak. I waited for the walls to come back up, for the coldness to settle in again. But instead, he laughed. Not loud, not bitter, just hollow. You were 13, he said finally, his voice low and raw. I saw you fall off your bike in front of that bakery. Your mother came running out and you laughed. You got up and laughed like it didn't hurt at all. I swallowed, remembering the moment like it had happened just yesterday. I was there on business with my father, he continued, staring down at the floor. He didn't know I'd gone to look around. I wasn't supposed to be there. He ran a hand through his hair, something cracking in his expression. I never forgot the way you smiled. like the world couldn't touch you. I felt something twist deep inside me. And when your father came to me about the debt, his voice broke. I thought it was fate. I told myself I was saving you, but I wasn't, was I? He finally lifted his head, his eyes finding mine. I trapped you. My throat burned. My heart felt like it might split in two. I crossed the room slowly, until there was barely an inch between us. I don't know what this is, I whispered. I don't know what we're doing, but I can't keep pretending I'm not here. I reached out before I could stop myself. My fingers brushed against his. He flinched like I'd burned him, but he didn't pull away. His breath hitched, his hands uncrossed slowly, cautiously, like he wasn't sure if touching me would undo him. When his palm finally closed around mine, my heart nearly stopped. It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't some sweeping declaration. It was barely more than a touch. But it changed everything. We stood there, fingers trembling in each other's grasp, like two people standing on opposite sides of a cliff, reaching for something they couldn't quite name. I don't hate you, I whispered. His breath shuddered out of him like I'd knocked the air from his lungs. Bella. My name in his voice felt like something fragile and holy. I'm still afraid, I admitted, my throat tight. I don't know how to do this. His fingers tightened around mine, just enough to make me feel the weight of his touch. Neither do I, he breathed. But I want to try. For the first time since I had walked into this house, the silence didn't feel like it was crushing me. It felt full of something that scared me more than the emptiness ever had. Hope. We stayed like that until the fire burned low. Neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. And for the first time since I signed that contract, I started to wonder if maybe, just maybe, I had signed my name to something more than a debt. Maybe I had signed my name to a beginning I hadn't dared to hope for. I didn't expect things to change overnight. And they didn't. Dominic didn't suddenly start filling the halls with warmth or laughter. He didn't take me by the hand in front of the staff or sit beside me at breakfast like some storybook husband. But something between us had shifted. Subtle, fragile, and real. We started seeing each other, not just passing by like strangers, but truly seeing. Some mornings, I'd find him already in the kitchen before the staff arrived, standing by the window with a mug of black coffee in his hand. He never said much, but he didn't walk away anymore, and that felt like something I could hold on to. One evening, I asked to visit Portland. I expected him to say no, expected that wall to come back up. Instead, he surprised me again. He nodded. "Take the car," he said softly. "Stay as long as you need." He didn't offer to come with me, and I didn't ask. But when I turned to leave the room, I heard him whisper behind me, so faint I almost missed it. "Tell her. I hope she's well." I hadn't realized how much I missed the smell of flour and sugar until I walked back into the bakery. The air smelled like home, like vanilla and yeast, and something older, something softer. My mother was sitting at the little table by the window, a blanket draped over her shoulders. Her eyes lit up when she saw me, and for a moment, I felt 12 years old again, running into her arms after a long day at school. I dropped to my knees beside her chair, clutching her fragile hands in mine. "I missed you, Mama," I whispered. She cupped my cheek, her touch shaking, but warm. "I missed you more, my sweet girl." We talked for hours that night. About the bakery. About the past. About Margaret Blackwood. She told me things I'd never known before. "Margaret and we were like sisters once," she said softly, staring out the window as rain began to fall. She dreamed of leaving this life behind, of building something bigger, something brighter. She used to talk about it all the time, the life she wanted for her children. I swallowed hard. She loved your father once, my mother added, her voice small. But nothing ever happened. She continued quickly, her eyes meeting mine. They were just two young people who wanted something they couldn't have. That's all. I nodded, the weight in my chest easing just a little. I never knew, I whispered. My mother smiled, brushing a strand of hair from my face. Some things aren't meant to be known too soon, she said softly. Sometimes the heart needs to learn how to carry them first. The next morning, I noticed something strange. The bills on the counter were gone, and in their place, a paid-in full receipt from the medical supply company. I turned to my mother, confused. She shrugged. A man stopped by while you were sleeping, she said. Said he was settling an old promise. I felt my knees weaken. Dominic. I returned to Blackwood Manor that night, my heart heavier than I expected. I found him in the same place, his study, leaning against that desk like he was holding up the weight of the world. I didn't knock this time. I walked straight in. You paid the medical debt, I said quietly. He didn't deny it. He just looked at me with those dark eyes, unreadable as ever. You didn't have to do that, I whispered, tears threatening to rise. His jaw clenched. His voice came low and rough. I didn't do it because I had to. I took a step closer. I did it because I wanted to. The air shifted again, thick with something fragile and real. I crossed the room, stopping just short of touching him. Why? I breathed. He looked down, shaking his head like the answer was too much to bear. Because I can't stand to watch you carry this alone, he said softly. He reached out slowly, like he was afraid I might pull away. But I didn't. I took his hand in both of mine, holding it tight against my chest. For the first time since our wedding, I felt like a wife. Not because of a contract, not because of a debt, but because, somewhere along the way, I had started to choose him. For days. After that night, the air between us stayed warmer. Not bright, not easy, but something gentler. Something closer. Dominic didn't speak much, but when he did, his voice was softer. His eyes lingered longer. Sometimes I caught him looking at me like I was something he wasn't sure how to hold without breaking. And I let myself believe that maybe we were learning how to build something real. Until the call came. I was walking through the hallway, tracing the edge of the banister with my fingers, when I heard him, just around the corner, in his office. His voice was sharper this time. Tense. No, George, Dominic hissed. I told you this was the last time. I stopped cold. My father's name on his lips felt like ice water down my back. There was a pause, then Dominic's voice again. Lower, darker. You're lucky I'm keeping this quiet, but I swear to God, if you drag her into this again... He didn't finish. He slammed the phone down. I stood frozen, my heart thudding so hard I thought it might burst through my ribs. Dragging me into... what again? I didn't wait. I pushed the door open without knocking. Dominic turned, startled. Isabella. What did you mean? I snapped, my voice shaking. What are you keeping quiet? He swallowed, pushing a hand through his hair. It's nothing for you to worry about. Don't lie to me. My voice cracked, but I stood my ground. Not again. He looked like he wanted to argue, but the fight left his shoulders all at once. Your father, he muttered, took out another loan. Against your mother's. Medical care. Against the bakery. I felt the ground tilt beneath me. No, I whispered, shaking my head. No, he wouldn't. He did, Dominic said, cutting me off. His voice was flat, defeated. And I covered it. My legs almost gave out. I clutched the edge of the door frame to stay standing. You You paid it? He nodded. Without telling me? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. I felt something deep in me begin to splinter. You're just going to keep fixing everything. Behind my back? I choked, tears burning hot in my throat. Is that what I am to you? A problem you solve with money? He took a step toward me. It's not like that. Isn't it? My voice cracked. You keep me here. You pay for my family's mistakes. You make decisions like I don't get a say in any of it. His jaw tensed. I did it for you. I shook my head, backing away. No. You did it to control me, just like you've done from the start. He flinched like I'd slapped him. I didn't care. I couldn't care, because all I could hear was my father's voice that night in the bakery. Please, Bella, we have no other choice. And Dominic, standing there like he'd already won. I turned and fled the room. I packed my bag before the tears could stop. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay. Not in this house. Not with him. Not like this. I left the ring on the nightstand. The same place I'd found the basket of medicine. The place where, for a brief moment, I thought something real had begun. I closed the door behind me and walked away without looking back. The rain started again as the car pulled onto the highway toward Portland. It came down harder than before, blurring the world outside the window, until it looked like nothing but shadows and glass. I pressed my forehead to the cool pane, my breath fogging the glass. I had thought I could build something here. I had let myself believe in him, in us. But I had been wrong. I had let my heart hope. And now it was shattered. I arrived back at the bakery long after midnight. The windows were dark. The air smelled of old bread and rain. I unlocked the door with shaking hands and stepped inside, closing it quietly behind me. I dropped my bag on the floor and sank to the ground, curling up in the corner like I used to when I was little and scared of thunderstorms. Only this time, no one came to find me. No one whispered lullabies to chase the fear away. I pressed my face to my knees and let the tears fall, muffling my sobs in the folds of my sweater. Because this time, I had walked away from the only person who had ever truly tried to stay. I didn't sleep. I don't know why I thought I could. I sat on that bakery floor for hours, listening to the storm outside, the old pipes in the walls ticking with every gust of wind. Memories kept pressing in on me. Of the night I signed that contract, of the way Dominic had looked at me when I told him I didn't want to be his problem anymore. Part of me had expected him to fight, to follow me down that hallway, to slam the door shut and refuse to let me leave. But he hadn't. He just stood there, silent, watching me walk away. I didn't know which was worse. Morning came slow and gray, pressing through the windows like a sigh. I couldn't bear to turn on the lights. The darkness felt safer, softer somehow. I made tea on instinct. My hands knew the steps even if my heart didn't. Boil water. Steep the leaves. Hold the cup close enough to feel the warmth on my skin. But nothing could fill the cold in my chest. I was rinsing the cup when I heard the knock. Soft. Hesitant. I stood frozen, the water still running over my fingers. For a moment, I thought I had imagined it. But then it came again. I dried my hands slowly, every movement heavy, as though part of me already knew who it was. I crossed the small kitchen, unlocked the front door, and pulled it open. There he stood, Dominic. Soaked to the bone, rain dripping from his hair, his coat clinging to his frame. His shoulders hunched in a way I'd never seen before, like the weight he always carried had finally broken him. I couldn't speak. He didn't try to come in. Didn't try to close the distance. He just stood there, like a man who had nowhere left to go. I didn't know if you'd let me knock, he said, voice raw, barely above a whisper. I gripped the edge of the door, afraid my knees might give way again. He ran a shaking hand through his wet hair, rain still streaking down his face like he didn't even feel it. I've never been good at this, he whispered. Not with words. Not with people. I swallowed hard, my throat aching. I thought I could fix everything with contracts, with money. I thought if I controlled enough pieces, I could keep you safe. He took a step forward, then stopped, himself. But I didn't keep you safe, did I? His voice cracked on the last word. I just made you feel like you didn't have a choice. The ache in my chest twisted tighter. You didn't stop me from leaving, I whispered. His shoulders slumped like I'd punched the air out of him. Because I didn't think I deserved to stop you. He took another step. Slower this time, like he was afraid the ground might split beneath him. I don't deserve you, Bella. He looked down, his voice breaking completely. I never have. I felt my breath catch. The rain was still falling, but I didn't care. I stepped outside, the cold sinking into my skin. I didn't stop until I stood right in front of him. He flinched, like he expected me to push him away. I didn't. I reached up, brushing the wet hair from his forehead with shaking fingers. His breath hitched beneath my touch. I'm so tired of running, I whispered. His eyes closed, his jaw trembling. I don't know how to fix this, I breathed, my voice cracking. But I don't want to do it alone. His arms trembled as he reached for me, but when they wrapped around me, they held on like I was the last thing keeping him standing, and I held him back, just as tight, right there, in the rain, in front of the place where it all began. He buried his face in my shoulder, his breath hot and uneven against my skin. I can't live without you, Isabella, he choked, the words falling like glass between us. My heart shattered in the best way. I leaned back just enough to meet his eyes. Then stop trying to, I whispered. His hands cupped my face, thumbs trembling as they brushed away the rain. Or maybe the tears. I couldn't tell the difference anymore. He didn't kiss me. He didn't pull me closer. He just held me there, forehead pressed to mine, like he was memorizing the shape of my breath. We stayed like that for a long time. The rain easing into a soft drizzle. The world felt quieter somehow, like the storm had taken all the noise with it. When he finally spoke again, it was just 3 words, spoken like a promise. Come home with me. And for the first time, it felt like an invitation, not a demand. Nodded, my voice lost somewhere between my throat and my heart, because the truth was, I had never really left. I had just needed him to come and find me. We didn't speak much on the drive back. It wasn't like before, those long stretches of silence that felt like walls closing in. This was quieter, easier, like there was nothing left to prove, nothing left to fear. I kept my hand on his the whole way. He didn't let go once. When we reached Blackwood Manor, it didn't feel as cold as it used to. Maybe it was the way Dominic held the door open for me this time. Or maybe it was the way he watched me walk in, like he still couldn't believe I'd said yes. I stopped in the front hall, staring up at the high ceilings, the chandelier that once made me feel small. He came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist, resting his chin on my shoulder. I was going to tear this place apart looking for you, he whispered. I leaned back against him, closing my eyes. You didn't have to. We didn't go to the master bedroom that night. We went to the small sitting room on the 2nd floor, one I hadn't dared step into before. It smelled faintly of cedar and worn leather, like the years had settled in quietly without disturbing anything. Dominic built a fire in the old stone hearth. He made tea, fumbling with the kettle like it was the first time he'd ever touched one. We sat on the floor, cross-legged, knees almost touching. I told him everything. About the letter, about my mother's voice in my head, about how I had hated him and needed him all at once. He listened. Really listened. And when I was done, he reached into his jacket and pulled out something small, a folded piece of paper. He handed it to me without a word. I unfolded it slowly, my breath catching in my throat. It was a letter, new, freshly written, to the girl who saved me. I never deserved your forgiveness, but you gave it to me anyway. I never deserved your love, but I'll spend the rest of my life trying to earn it. Not with contracts, not with power, not with money, with mornings, with laughter, with quiet nights beside you, learning how to live again. I love you, Isabella. Dominic. My throat burned as I folded the letter back into my hands, holding it to my chest like it was something precious. I looked up at him, my heart full in a way I couldn't put into words. You don't have to earn it, I whispered. His eyes glistened in the firelight. He reached for my hand, threading our fingers together. I still want to try. We didn't rush. No grand declarations, no dramatic gestures, just two people sitting by a fire, learning how to be brave enough to start over. It didn't happen overnight. But little by little, the house changed. Dominic brought the bakery's old sign back from Portland, hanging it in the kitchen like a promise that we wouldn't forget where we started. He asked my mother to move in with us when her health started to fade again. She laughed when he offered to build her a garden on the east terrace. You can't buy me with a patch of dirt, Dominic Blackwood, she teased. He didn't even try to argue. He just smiled. And I realized he had finally learned how to give without taking. We filled the house with little things, cups of tea, fresh bread, blankets draped over worn couches. Laughter started to echo in the halls. Not every day, not always perfectly, but enough. Enough to remind me that this wasn't just a house anymore. It was a home. One evening, long after the fire had burned down to glowing embers, Dominic pulled me close on the couch. His voice was soft, steady. Will you marry me again? I leaned back, searching his face. No contract this time, he added with a smile. No debt, no terms, just me. I didn't need to think about it. I pressed my forehead to his, smiling through tears I didn't try to hide. Yes, I whispered. 1,000 times, yes. We married quietly in the garden under the oak tree on the east terrace. No suits, no ceremony, just us, barefoot in the grass, hands clasped tight. My mother stood by, her smile soft and sure, the way it used to be, when she hummed lullabies in our kitchen back home, and when Dominic kissed me this time, it wasn't a claiming. It wasn't a payment. It was a promise, one we both had waited a lifetime to make. We didn't need vows. We had mornings. We didn't need witnesses. We had laughter. We didn't need a contract. We had love. Real, quiet, unshakable. And every time, I woke beside him, tangled in soft sheets, hearing the rain tap against the window. I knew without a doubt. I hadn't lost myself the night I signed that paper. I had found the life I didn't even know I was brave enough to choose. I was his. He was mine, forever. If this story touched your heart, I'd be so grateful if you could take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world and helps me bring more heartfelt stories like this to you. Thank you for being here. I'll see you in the next one.